The war had never ended. Not truly. Officially, the Galactic Concord had brokered peace between the Xel'Dar Dominion and the United Terran Federation 2 centuries ago. Treaties were signed, trade routes opened, and diplomatic channels established. The Concord saw itself as the guiding hand of civilization, believing war to be an aberration rather than a force of nature. They convinced themselves that the Xel'Dar had changed, but humanity had learned differently. Captain Dorian Kane sat in his command chair aboard the ISS Revenant, an Onyx-class warship drifting in the shadow of a barren moon. His eyes traced the holographic display hovering before him, an intercepted data stream from a Xel'Dar relay station. His jaw tightened as streams of alien script translated into harsh, undeniable truth. The Dominion was mobilizing. Stealth ships, deep space supply chains, the movement of war fleets hidden beyond the galactic rim. The signs were all there, clear as a dying star's flare. Confirmation? Kane asked, his voice level, betraying none of the fury rising within him. Lieutenant Maya Voss, his chief intelligence officer, swept a hand through the interface, eyes scanning. Multiple pings match long-range recon data. They're building up forces along the Lagru's corridor. This isn't posturing. They're preparing for a full-scale incursion. Kane exhaled through his nose. Every instinct told him this day would come. The war had been a sleeping beast, not a dead one. The Xel'Dar were patient. They had waited, tested, feigned weakness, and now they were ready to strike. The Revenant was one of many in the Iron Shadow Armada, a fleet that did not officially exist. While the Concord bathed in self-delusion, humanity had spent 200 years preparing. In the dark void, hidden beyond the reach of complacent bureaucrats, warships like the Revenant had patrolled, watching, waiting. They were the blade in the dark, unseen but ever ready. Send a Priority 1 transmission to High Command, Kane ordered. Attach the raw data. Voss hesitated. Sir, if the Concord gets wind of this, they won't. Kane cut in. We don't answer to them. A flicker of something crossed Voss's face. Approval, perhaps. She nodded and turned back to her console. The bridge was silent save for the low hum of the ship's core. Outside, the void stretched infinite and indifferent. Kane glanced at the tactical display again. He knew what would come next. The Concord would dismiss their warning. The Xel'Dar would strike, and humanity would do what it had always done. Survive. 2 days later, the Revenant drifted above the shattered husk of Outpost Helios. The station, once a bastion of trade, was now nothing more than mangled debris spiraling through the black. Kane stared at the wreckage, the burn marks from plasma, fire scarring the metal like claw marks across flesh. Bodies floated among the ruins, frozen in the silence of space. No survivors, no distress calls. A precise, surgical extermination. Kane's fist curled. The Concord had claimed the Xel'Dar were evolving past their old ways, that peace was not only possible, but lasting. The truth was in front of him, silent and undeniable. The Dominion had never stopped sharpening its blades. Scans? Kane asked. Residual energy signatures match Xel'Dar plasma arrays, Voss reported. This wasn't an accident. They wiped the station clean, then withdrew. Standard terror doctrine. Why leave it in the open? Commander Elias Rourke, the Revenant's tactical officer, folded his arms. They could have covered their tracks. Instead, they left us a spectacle. Kane knew why. The Xel'Dar weren't hiding anymore. This was their declaration. Asterisk, asterisk, we are back. We were never gone. Asterisk, asterisk. A transmission pinged on the bridge. Encrypted, high priority. Kane accepted the call. A face flickered to life in the holographic display. Asterisk, asterisk, Fleet Marshal Adrian Solis, asterisk, asterisk. Her sharp gaze betraying the same grim realization clawing at Kane's mind. You were right, Solis said. No preamble. No hesitation. The Concord is calling this an unfortunate misunderstanding. They're refusing to engage. No formal action. Then we act without them, Kane replied. Solis nodded. The Council won't sanction war, but we will not stand by. The Iron Shadow Armada is moving to full alert. You have authorization to engage any Xel'Dar forces at your discretion. It was not an official declaration. It never would be, but it was the only order that mattered. Kane gave a sharp nod. Understood, Fleet Marshal. We'll make the first move. The transmission cut. Kane turned to his crew. Set course for the LeGru's corridor. Maximum burn. Rourke's eyes glinted. We taking the fight to them. Kane met his gaze. We remind them why they feared us in the first place. The Revenant rumbled as its engines surged to life. The war was never ended, but soon it would be, one way or another. The darkness between stars was rarely silent. For those who knew how to listen, it was a vast ocean of whispers, encrypted transmissions, shifting gravitational wakes, the faint hum of power cores lurking just beyond the reach of scanners. Captain Dorian Kane had spent years learning the language of the void. Tonight, it spoke of war. The ISS Revenant slid through the LeGru's corridor, cloaked in the black like a predator stalking its prey. The corridor was a stretch of unclaimed space bordering Xel'Dar territory, a narrow passage the Dominion had long pretended to ignore. Humanity had known better. The Xel'Dar never ignored anything of value, only waited until they could take it. Contact, Lieutenant Maya Voss murmured, eyes locked on the shimmering display before her. The words sent a ripple through the bridge, a quiet tightening of muscles, a sharpening of focus. Signature matches Xel'Dar warships. A full battle group. Kane leaned forward. Numbers. Voss swept her fingers through the data streams, filtering through interference. 17 ships. Mostly Ravager-class destroyers, but her voice dipped slightly. They've got a Leviathan leading them. A murmur ran through the bridge crew. Leviathans were not mere warships. They were siege engines, designed to obliterate entire fleets in single engagements. 2 centuries ago, one had raised 3 Terran colonies in a single day before humanity had found a way to stop them. Commander Elias Rourke exhaled slowly. They're not just raiding, they're testing our response. Kane nodded. The Xel'Dar were methodical. They never committed fully until they understood the enemy's strength. They would send a force just large enough to provoke a reaction, to see if the galaxy still had the stomach for war. The Concord would hesitate, weigh their options, and draft treaties that meant nothing. But humanity would answer. He keyed the ship-wide comms. Battle stations. The bridge lights dimmed to a deep crimson. Across the Revenant, weapons hummed to readiness. Energy coils feeding power into rail cannons and plasma arrays. Kane felt the shift in the air, the subtle weight of anticipation. Elm, he said, voice even, bring us in close. We hit them before they know we're here. The Revenant moved like a phantom, threading through the dark, silent and unseen. The Xel'Dar formation loomed ahead, their ships running in tight formation, unaware of the wolf slipping into their midst. Rourke's fingers danced over his console. Targets acquired. Kane let the moment stretch. Every second brought them closer, every heartbeat another step into the lion's den. Then, with a slow exhale, he spoke the words that would mark the end of the illusion of peace. Fire. The Revenant unleashed hell. Hypervelocity rounds tore through the void, slamming into the nearest Ravager before its shields could react. The destroyer cracked like fragile glass, its midsection detonating in a spray of molten debris. A heartbeat later, plasma lances carved through the second ship in line, slicing through its engines, sending it spiraling into the abyss. Alarms erupted across the enemy formation. The Xel'Dar, for all their cunning, had not expected this. They had grown used to weakness, to hesitation. They had forgotten the fury of humanity. Enemy response? Kane asked. Voss's voice was steel. They're scrambling. 2 destroyers repositioning, but the Leviathan, she hesitated. It's moving. Kane watched the war behemoth shift, its immense frame sluggish but deliberate. The Leviathan did not need to hurry. It was a force of inevitability. Incoming fire. Rourke barked. The void lit up. Xel'Dar plasma arrays roared to life, streams of burning energy slashing through the black. The Revenant rolled hard, her engines flaring as she slipped between the oncoming barrage. Explosions rippled through the battlefield as the remaining Ravagers opened fire, their shots wild with desperation. Shields holding, Voss reported, voice tight. But if that Leviathan locks onto us, we don't let it, Kane said. He scanned the battle map. The Leviathan was massive, but mass had its own price, momentum. It cannot turn quickly. It needed time to bring its primary weapons to bear. Time Kane refused to give it. Bring us under its firing arc, close the distance. Rourke shot him a look, but nodded. Aye, Captain. The Revenant dove, engines burning bright as it cut a path beneath the Leviathan-S bulk. From this angle, the behemoth's main cannons were useless, its gunners forced to rely on secondary defenses, flak batteries, smaller plasma turrets, weapons meant for repelling fighters, not a warship moving with surgical precision. Target their ventral plating, Kane ordered. Full spread. Railguns thundered. Torpedoes streaked through the dark, their detonations flowering along the Leviathan-S underbelly. Armor buckled. Energy shields flickered and failed. The behemoth lurched, a wounded beast in the abyss. Direct hit, Voss called, their main reactors destabilizing. Kane allowed himself a small, grim smile. The Leviathan would not die easily, but it would die all the same. A new alert flashed on the tactical screen. Kane's smile faded. Captain, Voss said, voice quiet. We got another problem. He saw it before she finished. A second fleet. Larger. Faster. Closing from the Xel'Dar home system. This had never been a test. This was the opening move of a war they had already committed to. Kane exhaled through his nose. We need to fall back. Now. Agreed, Rourke said. But that Leviathan is still operational. If we turn our backs on it. Kane made his decision. We don't run. We finish it. The crew did not hesitate. They trusted him. All power to weapons, he ordered. Fire everything we have. The Revenant unleashed a final barrage. Every railgun, every torpedo, every ounce of destructive force poured into the Leviathan-S core. The behemoth shuddered, cracks spreading like fractures in ice. Then, with a roar that shook the void itself, it detonated. A shockwave rolled through space, hurling debris in all directions. Kane barely had time to register it before Voss shouted. Jump signatures. The second fleet is almost here. No time. No choice. Helm, emergency burn. The Revenant-S engines screamed, tearing the warship from the battlefield, streaking toward the edge of the system. The last thing Kane saw before the jump drive engaged was the second wave of Xel'Dar's ships surging forward, their intent unmistakable. This was no skirmish. This was war, and humanity had drawn first blood. The moment the Revenant tore free of the battlefield, leaving behind the burning husk of the Leviathan, Captain Dorian Kane knew the war had truly begun. The Concord had failed. The Xel'Dar had never honored the treaties, had never even considered peace. Now, they were moving with deliberate, merciless precision, a calculated strike meant to unravel the fragile illusion of security the galaxy had wrapped itself in. And the fools in the Galactic Council still hesitated, still clung to the idea that diplomacy would solve this. Kane had no patience for illusions. The ship's corridors thrummed underfoot as he strode into the war room, his officers already gathered. The holographic display at the center of the chamber projected a grim sight, real-time data from deep space recon units painting a picture of escalation. Dozens of Xel'Dar battle groups mobilizing along the outer colonies. Supply chains forming. Something larger moving in the void beyond known space. Fleet Marshal Adrian Solis stood at the far end of the room, arms crossed, expression unreadable. They're preparing for something big. Kane's jaw tightened. They already have their foot on our throat. Commander Rourke exhaled, running a hand over his face. Concord Intelligence still believes this is posturing. They're stalling with negotiations, buying time that only benefits the Xel'Dar. Then we act without them, Kane said. Solis turned to him. We already have, and now we move to end this. She keyed in a command, and the display shifted. A new image flickered into view, a station buried deep in Xel'Dar space. unlike any human or Concord design. It was a thing of jagged metal and seething energy, alive with power, bristling with defenses. The Dominion's war machine is being fueled from here, SOS said. We don't have a name for it yet, but it's their primary logistics hub. Every invasion fleet will pass through this point before reaching Concord space. Kane studied the data. The numbers were staggering. Supply convoys, fuel depots, shipyards churning out warships at a scale the Concord couldn't hope to match. The Xel'Dar weren't just launching an attack. They were preparing for a war of annihilation. Voss spoke, her voice measured. You're suggesting we strike first. I'm not suggesting anything, SOS replied. This isn't about suggestions. We either break their spine now, or we face them when they're ready, when we're outnumbered 10-1. Kane didn't hesitate. Then we take it out. A silence stretched through the room. No one argued. No one hesitated. The Iron Shadow Armada had existed for this purpose, to do what must be done while the rest of the galaxy deliberated itself into extinction. Rourke folded his arms. We can't assault it directly. A frontal attack would be suicide. We won't, Kane said. We infiltrate, cut them open from the inside. A plan formed his mind, even as he spoke, taking shape like a knife being sharpened. A surgical strike team, coordinated sabotage, hit their core systems, disrupt their supply lines, leave the station a lifeless husk before their war machine ever fully roars to life. SOS nodded. I'll authorize a strike force. But this is your operation, Kane. You know how the Dominion fights. You know how they think. Kane met her gaze. We won't fail. The fleet marshal turned to the room. Then prepare. We leave in 6 hours. The room emptied as officers moved with quiet, practiced efficiency. Plans had been made. Orders given. War was moving forward, with or without the Concord's approval. Kane remained a moment longer, staring at the glowing image of the Xel'Dar war station. He had fought them before. He had seen what they did to those who surrendered. There was no victory through diplomacy, no survival through retreat. This would end only one way. The Revenant emerged from slip space at the outer edge of the system, its hull cloaked in sensor-disrupting fields, its engines running cold. Kane stood on the bridge, watching the Xel'Dar station loom in the distance like a great, slumbering beast. It did not know death was coming. The strike team was already en route, a detachment of ghost operatives, humanity's deadliest black ops soldiers, moving and undetected aboard a stealth transport. The plan was simple in concept, brutal in execution. They would breach the station, sabotage its core infrastructure, and cripple the Dominion's war effort before it ever reached full strength. On the main display, tactical readouts showed the enemy fleet movement. Warships were coming and going in an intricate pattern, thousands of tons of military hardware shifting through the void like blood through veins. They have no idea we're here, Voss murmured. They will, Kane replied. When it's too late. The minutes stretched into hours. Every second, tension wound tighter. Kane's hands remained steady, his mind focused, calculating. This wasn't just another battle. This was the moment. The strike that would decide the war's course before it truly began. Then the alert flashed across the display. A single transmission from the strike team, coded and compressed. We are inside. Beginning operation, ***. Kane allowed himself a breath. Now we wait. Silence. Long and heavy. Then, alarms. Xel'Dar, transmissions flaring. Erratic fleet movement. The Dominion was reacting, scrambling. Rourke grinned. I think they noticed. Kane watched the war station's power signatures fluctuate. Explosions rippled across its hull. The ghosts were doing their work, cutting deep, severing vital arteries. Voss leaned forward. Multiple energy surges. Hold on. Something's wrong. Kane's gut twisted. What is it? Voss's hands moved rapidly over her console, decrypting a flood of Xel'Dar data. Then she froze. They knew. The words hit like a hammer. Kane's mind snapped into focus. What do you mean they knew? Rourke demanded. The station, it's not just a logistics hub. Voss's voice was tight, her skin pale under the dim glow of the monitors. It's a trap. As if to punctuate the words, the tactical map flared with new contacts. Dozens. Hundreds. An entire fleet emerging from subspace. Kane's mind worked fast, piecing together the puzzle even as the enemy forces materialized. The Xel'Dar had lured them here. Let them believe they had the advantage. And now, they were closing the jaws of the trap. He snapped into motion. Recall the strike team. Helm, prepare for emergency maneuvers. Too late. The void ignited. Xel'Dar warships descended from all sides, their plasma lances carving through space, their fighters swarming like a living storm. The Revenant lurched as the first barrage struck, shields flaring, decks trembling under the onslaught. Voss's voice cut through the chaos. We're surrounded. Kane gritted his teeth. No fear. No hesitation. Adapt. Survive. Strike back. Asterisk asterisk. Bring weapons to full, he barked. Focus fire on their vanguard. Punch a hole and get us out. The Revenant retaliated, railguns thundering, torpedoes streaking through the black. Explosions blossomed, Xel'Dar ships crumbling under the sudden counterattack. But there were too many. Kane's hands clenched into fists. He had walked them into a noose. The Xel'Dar had been waiting. And now, for the first time, Kane wondered if this war had already been lost. The void was chaos. The Revenant twisted through the storm of plasma fire, its hull wreathed in the dying light of Xel'Dar warships. The ambush had been perfectly orchestrated, a trap lane with patience and precision, and now the jaws were closing. Every second, more enemy ships arrived, their formation tightening, sealing off every possible escape route. Captain Dorian Kane stood at the heart of the maelstrom, unmoving, his mind a machine of calculations. Fear was useless. Hesitation was death. There was only the next move, and the next, and the next. Shields at 26%. Voss called over the alarms blaring across the bridge. Port side battery is down. We can't take another direct hit. Kane's voice was steel. We hold the line. Keep firing. Railguns roared, carving through the black, slamming into Xel'Dar hulls with relentless precision. The Revenant danced between kill zones, dodging fire by the barest margins, but the enemy's numbers were impossible to ignore. Commander Rourke's jaw was clenched. We won't last much longer like this. Kane already knew. The ship's systems were failing, the damage mounting. But they weren't dead yet. A flicker on the tactical screen caught his eye, a surge of energy deep within the Xel'Dar fleet, a pattern emerging in their movements. A weakness. Their shifting formation, Kane said, eyes narrowing. They think they have us locked, but they're compensating for something. Voss's hands flew over the controls, scanning the data. Then she saw it too. They're positioning around the station's gravity well. That means they're using it as an anchor, Kane finished. Which means we can use it against them. A plan formed, raw and reckless, but it was the only way. Helm, Kane said, prepare for a slingshot maneuver. We burn full speed toward the station, ride the gravity well, and break through their flank before they can react. Rourke shot him a look. You want to dive into the middle of the fleet? I want to use their own trap against them, Kane said. If we time it right, they won't be able to adjust in time. It's a kill box, but only if we stay still. A moment's hesitation. Then Rourke nodded. Aye, Captain. The ship lurched as the engines roared to life, their remaining power diverted into propulsion. The Revenant surged forward, tearing toward the station, cutting dangerously close to the Xel'Dar formation. The Dominion ships reacted a fraction too late, adjusting their vectors, realigning weapons, but they had not expected the prey to charge the hunter. Plasma fire streaked past the hull. Shields burned. Armor melted. The Revenant dove straight into the heart of the Xel'Dar blockade. Then let the gravity well take hold. The ship twisted, accelerating into a vicious arc, bending the laws of inertia to its will. Enemy warships scrambled, their own formation now a liability as they overcompensated, their lines thrown into disarray. In that instant, they were exposed. Now, Kane roared. Every remaining weapon opened fire. Torpedoes lanced through space, streaking into vulnerable Xel'Dar engines. Explosions erupted across the battlefield as ships collided, thrown off course by their own overcorrections. The Revenant tore past the chaos, slipping through the gap they had carved in blood and fire. Slipstream drive charging. Voss called. Just a few more seconds. A sudden impact threw the ship sideways. The bridge shook, consoles sparking, crew thrown against their restraints. Kane caught himself against the command chair, forcing his vision to clear as red warnings flashed across the displays. Direct hit from the flagship, Rourke shouted. They took out our aft stabilizers. Kane's eyes snapped to the screen. The Xel'Dar dreadnought loomed behind them, its weapons primed for a final killing blow. There was no more room to maneuver, no more shields to hold, but there was still one last play. Divert all power to the slipstream drive, Kane ordered, including life support. A stunned silence. Voss hesitated. Captain, if we do that, we die anyway if we don't, Kane said. Do it. A pause. Then Voss's fingers flew over the controls. The ship groaned, the air thinned, the lights dimmed, every last reserve of power funneling into the drive. The Xel'Dar flagship fired. A beam of searing plasma screamed through the void, just as the Revenant vanished. The ship lurched into slipspace, engines screaming, the fabric of reality stretching around them. Kane barely heard the alarms blaring, barely felt the way his lungs struggled for oxygen. All that mattered was that they were out. Then silence. The Revenant drifted in the dark, the blue glow of slipstream stabilizing. The battle was behind them. The war, however, was far from over. Rourke exhaled, pressing a hand to his forehead. That was too close. Voss coughed, shaking her head. You think? Kane turned his gaze to the viewport, where the distant stars stretched before them. His body was exhausted, his mind a storm of calculations, but deep inside, something cold and unyielding burned. This had never been a battle. This had been a message. The Xel'Dar had never intended to simply win. They had wanted to lure humanity in, to see if they would fight, to measure their strength before the true war began. Now they had their answer, and Kane had his. We need to warn Fleet Command, he said. This was only the beginning. Rourke's expression darkened. Then what comes next? Kane's jaw tightened. The war was never ended, and now we finish it,